Hello everybody, welcome to High Ground, and today, yeah, another tier list. I guess it's been a minute, but I usually do one of these for most events, and maybe even some other stuff sometimes. So right, we've gone over the event, we've gone over the teams, and now, well, the groups I should say, which sort of had to do with the teams. Now we're going over the teams specifically, and this is a little bit more in a vacuum, so we do know, of course, the groups, so we know which teams are playing against which teams, and so thusly we can like sort of figure out who might be playing against each other in bracket, but that's getting still pretty speculative. Anyways, I'm going to go over these teams in such a way that just represents how good they do if, say, we didn't know the team. So this is taking into account not only how good the team is, but of course playing at specifically SI. So some of these teams have some history playing at SI, and some might not have any history, and some of the teams have players that do, and some of the teams have players that don't, and some have tendencies to do better internationally, worse internationally, whatever. I'm going to try to take all that into account, and I have it divided into just 5 tiers here: S, A, B, C, D. It's all relative. S is just going to be the best of the best. D is going to be the worst of the worst. At this event, of course, it's not easy to make it to SI. It represents supposedly the best 20 teams in the world. Probably not actually the best 20, but 20 of the very best teams. And as close as Ubisoft is capable of approximating it based on performances laid out ahead of time. Okay, so we're going to go down the line. I'd tell you all the names, but there's 20 names, so we'll just go in order, and if you don't recognize the logos, I'll probably be saying the name. Okay, and I guess, S tier is the ones that are you'd expect to win the event, and D tier, almost no chance to win the event. Very, very surprised, like maybe, and then A is also probably, wouldn't be surprised to see them win the event, but a little bit less likely than S. And okay, so we're starting with Astralis, and they started out strong this year, back-to-back first places in NAL, sandwich a second place major performance in Charlotte, and then they fell off. They didn't make it to the next major. They placed like, I don't even know, 6th, I want to say, in NAL stage number 3. Of course, didn't go to the major, and then played in SCS and didn't look very good. They, beat up on some non-T1 teams, and then they got smoked when they had to play against Oxygen, who is actually in their group. Do keep in mind. So they are in group, I think they're in group C, but again, we're not really taking that into account. They do have to play, they have a little bit stiff competition. Some people might say that's a strong looking group, but I said it was a pretty volatile group. But again, just trying to mostly examine teams in a vacuum. I'm going to put them in C tier. Yeah, they had good performances, but their most recent performance at anything was, a lackluster SCS, and before that, a lackluster NAL stage. But of course, just before that, some impressive performances. Does that mean that they got figured out? Does that mean they just slumped? I don't know what it is, but they haven't looked that good as of late. And compared to a lot of the teams here, yeah, I think C is fair. Like maybe you bump them up to B, and maybe they'll play like an A or an S tier team. But for now, just looking at it, I'm going to go with C for them. Then we have BDS and easy S tier. Easiest S tier, I think, of the event. They just won the last major, and they've also won like every event they've gone to in the last, 6 months or something. And only one of them was like a real event. One was an Invitational in Saudi Arabia, that Gamers 8 event. One of them was an Invitational in Japan, also not against the highest hero competition, maybe a few good teams in that, but they were easily the best team. One of them was the EUL finals, which they pretty much breezed through, and then one of them, of course, was the last major, which they very narrowly won over Liquid, who we'll talk about when we get there, but they're a little ways down the line. So yeah, BDS easy S tier, probably the favorite for the event, and I think actually no doubt the favorite for the event. They're not a lock-in, no team ever is, but if any team's, the most likely it's got to be BDS. And then we have Cyclops. Yeah, unfortunately, easy D tier. They did finally make a roster change after a very, very long time, but they've always been lackluster. I don't think they've ever made it out of groups. They've had a few close calls, especially at the Mexico Major. They had to play a tiebreaker, so one more round in their favor before that tiebreaker, and they would have advanced out of groups, eliminating the team that eventually did go on to win the event. So a little bit of credit there, but yeah, still never making it out of groups, despite having tried a lot of times. They have to go in D tier. And then we have DarkZero. So I think a lot of the NA teams are pretty hard to evaluate. Specifically, I think DarkZero, Oxygen, and maybe Astralis. I think Soniqs, SSG, and I don't know, M80, aka former XSET, maybe they're also hard to evaluate. I don't know. Maybe I have just more one-dimensional views of non-NA teams. Maybe that's the case, but I think, yeah, a lot of the NA teams... And I do think part of it is the fact that for some reason different NA teams go to events like pretty often. At least this year, like most of the teams went. I want to say did 7 of the 10 NA teams. Parabellum didn't go, Beast Coast didn't go, and is that it? Am I missing one? because all 6 of these teams, I think, went to an event, plus Mirage, plus TSM, right? Yeah, so 8 of the NA teams, yeah. So it's really difficult to call because some stages they'll place top 4 and some stages they won't. DarkZero is almost always locked into 3rd through 5th. I don't think they've ever placed 1st or 2nd in the modern NAL in 2021 or 2022. And they got like 6th place, I want to say, in stage 1. And then after that, I think they were between 3rd and 5th maybe there's one more stage they were below 5th, but pretty consistently, you know, fighting to make it into a major, you know, being in a major spot or just missing out on it. But generally when they go to events, they're pretty good. Now, it's been a little bit since they went to an event. Last one was Charlotte, but, you know, they won that. So credit to them there. They have a new pickup in Gaveni replacing Hyper, and then Skies replacing Eclipse, and that sort of happened mid-stage, and then Gaveni, well, this is going to be his first T1 anything. Hasn't played an NAL stage, hasn't played a major, going straight to SI, and that's a lot of pressure, but he has been very, very impressive in region. I think I might move him. I'm going to put him in B for now. Okay, Direwolves, another APAC team. They seem to have made it here just by the skin of their teeth. I just can't imagine they're going to be able to hang with the rest of these teams. I think they're probably if I had to rate all the teams 1 through 20, they'd be the last place. They'd be dead last. And so yeah, I mean, easy D tier. I did want to do a 1 through 20 thing, and I tried to get some people's perspectives on Twitter, but nobody really got back to me. So I'm just doing this tier list format instead of the actual 1 through 20. Maybe I'll do a little bit of approximation within the tiers, but we'll see. Okay, Elevate, the final APAC team, and I mean, definitely the one that you'd put your hopes on if you wanted to root for any APAC team. I don't really want to put them just in D tier, and yeah, they probably don't belong there. They didn't do especially well in their last regional stage, but the last 2 events they were at, they did pretty well. SI, which was a year ago now, but they placed like 9th through 12th or something. They didn't go out in groups. They didn't go out in the first round of bracket. They made a little bit of a splash on a year. You set the kill record, all that good stuff. And then they were top 8 at, was it just the most recent major? No, it must have been the one before. It must have been Berlin, right? When they fought against W7M. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was that major, but because, you know, they didn't do that well this last stage, so they weren't at the major, I think. Okay, so I'm gonna give them C. You know, maybe they deserve a B. Maybe I'm underrating them a little bit, but it's just so hard to give much credit to any APAC teams, because even if they're individually talented, they just don't get very many reps against good teams because of the, you know, the region is so underdeveloped. So unfortunate for them, but I'm gonna put them in C for now. You know, maybe I'll put them above Astralis because last time they played, I think they're in the same group at that major at Berlin, and they kind of dumpstered Astralis. Everybody did. Astralis took like 1 map. Anyways, on to FaZe Clan. They also have a new player coming in, sort of similar to DarkZero, and I guess DarkZero sort of has 2 new players with Skies returning to the roster, not a completely new player. And Vitaking, yeah, joining FaZe, replacing Cameraman. So that might affect how FaZe plays quite a lot. That was, you know, their IGL for a long time. I think they switched over recently to Astro, and that's probably the reason they were comfortable with replacing Cameraman. If he's not the IGL and he's not putting up numbers, I mean, what's he really there for? So bringing in a T2 star, I want to say. I don't think he was a T3 player. I think coming from T2. And, I mean, he must be pretty good. There's some rumors that he's just here temporarily and they're trying to get keys, maybe another player. We'll have to see. FaZe, usually a super threat. I'm going to put him in A, though. It's just a little bit tumultuous with the new pickup, and they also, you know, been slightly inconsistent. Despite some good showings, you know, they did win a major, not this year, but last year, and then well, very close, you know, runners up in Berlin, but not quite there. I'm going to give them A tier, mostly for the roster change. Okay, which might end up working out well for them. We'll have to see. G2, another team that's really, really hard to predict. Usually people predict them to not do well, and then they do better than people predict. Definitely a really stacked roster. They did lose probably their best player, perhaps, you know, probably one of the best players in the world in Citizen, being replaced by Benjamaster, who's also quite a good player. Been playing really well in his time on Heroic, and they still have Doki, they still have Alamau, Virtue, and Blur to round out the roster. Yeah, really, really strong roster individually. We'll just have to see if it comes together as a team. That's always been the question for G2. They have all this talent, but will it work out in the server? And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. They've had a few major appearances, a few playoff appearances, but I don't think they've cracked past top 8 in quite some time. So I think I'm just gonna put them in C. Maybe they're deserving of B, but I'm going to put them in C for now. If one of these tiers is really, really heavy, I might adjust things at the end. But you know, you just can't doubt the roster. They're in pretty decidedly the group of death, along with Elevate, Space Station, W7M, and Koi. And a lot of people think they will be the one being grouped. We'll have to see if that international magic shines through or not, though. Okay, on to Heroic, and If there's any non-APAC team to write off, it's probably them. I'm going to put them in D tier. Yum was really, really good at whatever the last major they were at. I don't remember if it was Berlin or Jönköping. But yeah, he was going crazy. I think they still went out in groups, right? But he was going crazy, and they lost Benjamaster. Unfortunate. Bringing in Noodle, Sloth returning to the roster, I assume temporarily, but we'll have to see. Sloth was quite good, and I think the reason he ended up leaving the roster was more internal stuff rather than his performance. So it could work out, but no group is especially easy, and it's just with 2 new players, just a lot of stuff, some downgrades perhaps. Maybe Noodle will pop off, maybe he won't, but some teams have to be in the D tier, and so I think I'm going to have Heroic here. Maybe look out for a few star performances from some of their players, but I just can't imagine maybe they make it out of their group in like 4th place, but I'd be very surprised if they make it to winner's bracket. And then we have Koi, and I think a little bit of a contentious one in the eyes of some people. So I think some people think they're a super threat, like gonna make top 4 or something, and some people think they'll be eliminated in groups. I think I've seen them in different people's tier lists, and not that I've even seen that many, but I want to say I've seen them in all 5 positions except for maybe first. I don't think many people are doubting W7M first. W7M, I think I've seen like maybe somebody had him in first. I don't remember, but I think I want to say I've seen 1 or 2 that didn't have W7M in first, but it's hard to pick against those guys at this point. Anyways, back to Koi. So yeah, they won not the most recent major, but they won the major before that. They weren't at the most recent major. A little bit of a hangover after a win, as many teams have had, or sometimes a win, sometimes just a really good performance, and then they don't fare as well for whatever reason. I think it'd be a little bit disingenuous to put them anywhere down here. B might be even, I think I'm just going to put them in A. I mean, I think that's fair. Yeah, they didn't make the most recent major, but just like 6 months ago, they won an event. And I don't know, the majors this year have been weird. A lot of people will call Charlotte a Mickey Mouse major. I think even Berlin, like some people, like they won it by the skin of their teeth. And they have maybe a little bit of a gimmicky playstyle, depending on how you view the Echo play. And well, just their really aggressive playstyle. But you could also call it innovative. I mean, Echo is a strong operator. Like if you can 2 drones you can drive around, plus you have the shield, and now he's a 2-speed, 2 armor. Yeah, he's just a good operator. But the way they play him, super aggressive. I think it fits the meta, and well, they were the best team in Berlin, so clearly it must have fit that meta pretty well. I think I'm gonna put him in A. I think it's fair enough. Let me know if you guys think that's not the appropriate placement. I think it's good. Maybe A or B. I don't think I'd put him in S, but maybe. We'll see. Liquid, another S tier. Yeah, the runners up from the most recent major, losing to BDS, so they were 1 map away from being the champion instead of BDS. And Liquid, they've had so many heartbreaks. They were the runner up at not the most recent SI, but the one before that. They had a pretty good run at the last SI. They were the tournament favorite, I think, in most people's eyes. And they fell to, I think it was MIBR that ended up knocking them out, and they got to like 5th/6th place. I think they tied with the Soniqs, I want to say. Still a good placement, and runner up previous SI, runner up at the most recent major. Just so many factors that go into them looking like one of the strongest teams in the world. The recent addition of Lagonis to replace PSK. Yeah, just such a stacked roster with so much potential. They've shown so much of that potential, but they just haven't reached the absolute peak, it wouldn't seem. Will Palu and Nesk ever get their trophy? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe. And then we have Los One. This is the only one. I was like, what logo is that? But yeah, it's Team One's new logo, Los One. And I think this is another one that's tough to call. I think a lot of people are overlooking them a bit. Not an easy group by any means. They're probably like around the middle of it. It's the one with Oxygen and BDS and Astralis and Cyclops, I think. So I don't know. I mean, if I had to like rank that group, I'd probably put them in like 3rd or 4th. I think I'm just gonna put him in C for now. Again, maybe we'll do some adjusting. C is getting a little bit dense, but several of these players did make their international debut in Charlotte, but that was also just a terrible event for them because they had to play remotely, but then they made it to the playoffs, and 2 of their players still had to play remotely. 3 of them were there. It's just super weird, and they got knocked out by DarkZero. Took a map, which is good, but okay. I think that was their only... Did they make it to another major? I don't know. Anyways, they have some experience. They have some good players, but we'll have to see if they can really hang with the rest. I'm going to put them in C for now. And now we have XSET, and for my mind, this is probably one of the hardest to rate. After hearing some people's opinions on the Oxygen, I think they've gotten a little bit easier for me. I was a little bit unsure, but I'll talk about them when I get to them. Anyways, XSET, yeah, they were a very consistent team in the first 2 stages of NA. They placed, I think, 4th both times, which is good enough to make the major, and then they placed top 8 in Charlotte, and then they placed top 4 in Berlin, I believe, and then they, you know, again, they didn't make the stage 3 major. Their play fell off a little bit. They just boot camped in Latin America. I'm not exactly sure where it was, but and of course the org change from XSET to M80. And I think I'm gonna put them in B. It's a little bit unclear. I think they could easily like make a very deep run. They could do really, really well. They might deserve A. I think I'm probably trying to slightly underrate teams just so it's not really top heavy. A lot of the teams, I think they can move up one. I don't think there's many teams that I'd move down a tier, but yeah, I'm gonna put them at B for now. And then we have MNM, and probably also one of the seemingly weaker teams. I do think they're a bit over or underrated, perhaps. They've made it to a lot of events. They just really haven't made a splash at the events that they've gone to. Now they have a roster change replacing what most people thought was their weak link in Neo, bringing in Nathan, who hasn't been spectacular, but could be a nice role player. I don't know if he's going to be the X factor that they need, but they do seemingly have a lot of X factor on the team. Tyrant, Solotov, and Uses all have different pop-off performances. Will their inconsistency be their downfall? Maybe, as players. But generally it's led to a consistency as a team that hasn't been to a high enough level of play to do super well. I think they also maybe deserve C. I might have to trim up the C tier. It's getting kind of fat now. So yeah, I'm gonna put them there for now. One of these teams probably is gonna have to get moved out though. Oxygen. So pretty abysmal performance in the first half. They went like 0-5 or something in NAL and then won the next 4. So they really turned things around. They changed their roles up, and this is right after swapping out Laxing for Sweater. And Sweater, you know, a really impressive player. I think a lot of people think he has a lot of potential. He's shown out. He showed out a bunch of times on Beast Coast, dropping like 20+ kill games. I think more than once. And then now in Oxygen, he hasn't been as good. He was okay. I think he maybe did a little bit better with the role swap, and then he played an SCS with the team, and they also looked pretty good. Again, not against the highest tier of competition, but still some decent teams in there, and they didn't look too shaky. It went all 5 maps, I think, the grand final, but they took the whole thing relatively handily. I think I'm gonna throw them in A. So I think for some people's minds that might be a little bit of an overrating, but they usually do pretty well internationally. They do have a couple that they didn't do so well. There's the one where Fox was 6, so that one doesn't even count. At the last couple SIs, they've done pretty well. They made top 8, I want to say, at the most recent SI, and I can't remember what they were before that. I want to say top 6, the one before that. And of course, roster changes now. The only player from those, the only players still on the roster from then is Vertical and Foxe. And a lot of people are saying you need Sweater to show out, and you need Vertical to show out, because Newers, Foxe, Dream, they're all pretty consistent. They usually do well. If those other 2 players show up, that's a real menace of a squad. Vertical has had many good performances in his time, but especially lately just has been so shaky internationally. So we'll have to see. I'm going to put him in A tier, and that might be the biggest overrating that I do here, but I do think a lot of people have them in like S or A tier in their opinion. So on to Secret. Yeah, another C tier. So I'm going to have to adjust things in a moment. But yeah, maybe they deserve higher than this. They were impressive. They didn't drop a map in their qualifier, but I mean, looking at all their other performances, they've just been so not good in EOL, really. Just maybe they finally figured things out, but I don't know, just off the qualifier performance, I don't think that's enough to rate them very highly. So I'm going to put them there for now. And then we have Soniqs. I think another S tier team. I think you all know who I'm going to have in S tier, because I've mentioned it previously if you've seen the other videos. Soniqs, and they're probably the toughest sell in S tier just because Citizen just came out on the roster. They're the only one of the S tier teams that just made a roster change. You know, Citizen hasn't played any tier 1 anything with the team. But you have Grixer and you have Citizen on the same team, and Rexen, like, that's crazy. And Rexen, a little bit hot and cold sometimes. I think recently, though, he's just been on. He's probably one of the best players in the world when he's on, and I mean, if he's just on like he has been, really, really scary menace. And so I don't know where I'd rank him in the actual rankings, but I think it's pretty hard to deny that Grixer and Citizen are both top 5 players in the world. You'd probably say those 2 plus Palu, Keys, and Shaiko are like the top 5. You know, maybe there's a little bit of room for debate, but I think it's pretty locked into that. And just with that sheer level of talent plus 4 of these 5 guys, you know, it's the same roster, but with Kansas instead of Citizen, made top 4 at the last major. I think it's an easy S tier placement. They placed top 6 at the last SI, and yeah, a few roster changes since then, but I'm sure the core values and whatnot are still there, as well as the core of Grixer plus Rexen are still there. Okay. SSG, A tier, B tier. I mean, like, maybe they even deserve C tier. I'm going to put them in B for the time being. I don't know, maybe they deserve A. I'll look at this one more time at the end, but yeah, so they had a good run through the qualifiers, not as convincing as, say, Secrets was, but I think also the level of competition was higher than the EU one, despite, you know, the Empire players being in the EU one, the ex-Empire players, but I think they're a little bit washed. They needed a little bit more practice together. I don't know. We'll have to see. Maybe their time has come and gone. But SSG, yeah, they lost to RTV, but then they beat RTV on the rematch. They beat Mirage before that, and they beat so they beat all 3 of the other teams in the competition. 7-0ing TSM for the first time ever, retiring Bolo, yeah, all that good stuff. I think they do have potential. I think some people think they'll even do bad in their groups, like 4th or 5th. Some people think maybe they'll top their group. Maybe they can even go on to win this thing. We'll have to see. But I'm going to average that out and put them in B for now. It just depends if they show up. They have a lot of talent. They're a really good roster when they play well, but I mean, as is commonly the case in Siege, consistency is key. So W7M, you know where they're going. Easy S tier, and I mean, you know, maybe they even deserve to be like higher up. They lost to FaZe and they lost to Liquid in the last 2 majors semifinals, right? Or was it? Did they make top 4 both times? They definitely lost in the semifinals to Liquid. Was it? Yeah, no, it was. Okay, they beat Elevate and they beat like Black Dragons at. Yeah, okay. So they were top 4 at the last 2 majors, losing to LATAM teams both times. So, I mean, is it just the case that they have this sort of wild, unpredictable playstyle and the teams from their region know them better, so they're able to adapt more quickly, take them down? Because there's no doubt these are all very skilled players on the roster, especially after Julio's coming in to replace GDN. Just a very storied player, a former world champion in his own right. And, I mean, they have Keys, another one of those top 5 players. So it looks like actually all 5 of those top 5 players are in the S tier. So Shaiko, Palu, Keys, Citizen, and Grixer. So yeah, so it should be some Clash of Titans type stuff, but none of these teams are in the same group, right? This is Group A. No, Group A. I don't know. What is it? Are 2 of them in the same group? Did I get that wrong? Is Liquid in the same group? No, yeah, Liquid and Soniqs are in the same group, sorry. So that is, I want to say that's the first time Grixer and Palu were playing, and so, and of course, Citizen also in the mix. And finally, we have Wolves. So this one, I think it's a little bit hard to rate. Some people at some points have maybe called them the best team in Europe. I think it's really hard to give them that title now over BDS. 3 months ago, maybe you could have said that, but you know, it's sort of tough. They haven't won anything like BDS and Koi have, but they've been consistent. They've been going to events. They place well within a region, and they're, I think, the longest standing roster at this event. It's either them or XSET. I don't know. M80, right? They're the only teams. I think I just saw a CGG article talking about this. They're the only 2 teams that haven't made a roster change since the last SI. If I read that correctly. Okay, so you know, a long-standing roster, at least a year. Maybe not super long-standing. Mowgli hasn't been here forever, but we'll have to see. I definitely am not going to put them in S. Am I going to put them in A? I guess so. I think they're deserving of that. Again, they've fallen a little bit short, perhaps, of expectations, but they've been good, right? I don't think you can really fault them. This could be the event where they make it all, they go all the way. They could win it. We'll have to see. I think a lot of people doubt their ability to win an SI with Rise on the squad, but you know, he must be an important player if he's still on the roster after all this time. And then finally, as I mentioned many times, let me move 1 team out of C up to B. And who's it going to be? Not Secret. I don't think MNM. Maybe it should be Team 1. I guess I'll go Elevate. Again, just not a great performance in their last stage in APAC, which, you know, the competition that is there maybe is a little bit alarming, but pretty good showings at their last 2 international events, and no bad showings at their international events. Maybe they just haven't gone to enough to do badly, but I'll give them the credit. I guess I'll put them in B. The other team I'm inclined to do is G2, but I don't know. Let me know which team you think is higher. And then as far as the order, I guess, I mean, I'll maintain that. I guess I'll put Wolves up here, maybe something like that. And then here, I actually have 3 NA teams right here. Who do I think? I'll do that maybe. And then perhaps this. and maybe secret should be higher. I don't know, but I guess this is about the best approximation I could do. Maybe a few teams I'd swap, but I don't think there's any teams that I think go up or down very much. Of course, again, after they play, maybe it will be the case that some teams need to be adjusted, but this is before seeing them play, so do keep that in mind. Maybe I'll do another thing, well, probably not after groups, but I might start doing predictions for the bracket after groups, but right now there's just too many matches to be played in groups. So, okay, if you have your own predictions, feel free to leave them below. Any questions, comments, concerns, let me hear it in the comments, and a like and a subscription would be appreciated. With all of that being said, catch you guys in the next video.